My name is John, and tonight I'm going to be your guide for this webinar all about gap planning. And I know we're deep in the college decision process right now. It's a stressful time to be a senior, or some of you may be juniors and starting to approach that college process now, which in that case, you're in a great spot as well. But again, this workshop is designed to break down what a gap year is, discuss how it fits alongside college planning, and we're going to walk through what your options are, and how gap year planning actually settles pretty nicely right into your own high school timeline as well. So hopefully you all leave with a better understanding of your options and if this feels like a good fit. One piece that I want to also make sure we touch on is we're going to then dive into a conversation afterwards with our special guest, Michael Leaser. So just want to give some context, some introduction into myself. Two things to know about me. I too was in your shoes pretty recently. I am in fact a EF gap year alum. So now I get to work with students and families like you all every single day, just helping them figure out whether a gap year is a right fit for them. I've also helped lead some programs of our own, and I'm also on the board of the Gap Year Association as their alumni ambassador as well. So if it's not clear enough, I was immensely impacted by my own gap program and really believe in the transformative abilities of gap years. And we're also super fortunate to have Michael Leaser joining us this evening. Michael, would you want to just give us a quick intro of who you are and the experience you bring into this conversation tonight?
Yeah, thank you so much, Sean. I'm Michael Leaser, and I have been a teacher trainer. I have run many education services programs all across the United States and actually in quite a few different countries. I didn't do a post-high school gap year, but I did do a couple of like gap year-like experiences and have actually visited about 25 countries. Have lived overseas and in Canada, and John and I spoke a little ways back and kind of seemed like a natural fit. So thank you all very much for letting me be here tonight.
Super appreciate that, Michael. And I think now is a good time. We can dive into the actual content of who is EF and the whole college deferral process. But again, definitely want to encourage you all to utilize the chat in the Q&A to allow me to expand on anything that you're curious about, and also for direct questions for myself and Michael as well. So to begin, I want to tell you all about EF and who we are. And the first question we always get is, what does EF stand for? EF stands for Education First. And we've been doing educational travel since 1965, and we are the nation's largest provider in that field. And so we've been doing that for about 60 years. And within that time, we have helped millions of people see new places, experience new cultures, learn new languages, just discover new things about the world and about themselves. So many of you could probably know us already because we work with your high school, or maybe you have traveled with us through EF Tours or EF Explore America. I always like to say we call ourselves globally local because we have over 50,000 staff and over 400 offices in 114 countries all around the world. And I'm saying all this because it results in us ending up with a really unique perspective where we can see at a massive scale and at a firsthand experience just how the education landscape is starting to shift right in front of us. And we're also seeing that ultimately more and more students are following these untraditional paths, the desire to learn more about the world, more about themselves, and more about themselves actually in the world. So I want to speak first that there can be a lot of misconceptions about what a gap year is, and there can be a lot of things that can be considered a gap year. So when it comes to us, we have a very focused, defined lane. So our gap years are intentional, focused, and centered around personal growth. They really are stepping stones to whatever might be next, whether that's college or job or whatever comes next for you. So here directly at EF Gapper, we work with all sorts of students who are looking to take a gap. Students like myself who did it right after high school and before college, but also people who are in Michael's situation doing this after they graduate college as well. So people after their freshman year of college, really it fits between that college-aged career as well. So if you have any sort of inkling that you might want to take a gap, but just aren't sure if it's the right fit, or if you want to take a gap but don't know how to make it happen, or if you're waiting to hear back from college or have heard back from your college already and gap is on your radar, you're in the right place. So today we'll talk all through the gap planning journey, especially for those who are still in high school and starting to think about college. And also this info is going to be similarly helpful for people who are already in college or in a different position. A lot of gap planning can still be applicable. So here's the thing about gap years. It's a simpler process that you might actually think, and there really are three main paths. So the first is to apply to college as you normally would during your senior year, where you then defer your acceptance and enroll in your gap program. The second is to commit to a gap year and then use your year as a time to research and apply to colleges. Then the third is to apply to colleges during your senior year and then choose to either defer or reapply during your gap year. And I've worked on this team for quite a while now, and even I took a gap year myself, like I said. So I know that the biggest problems that students run into is that they don't start planning early enough. So important to start planning now. And it's helpful that the gap planning process really mirrors the college planning process. So to start with, you really need to sit down and start thinking about your options, your goals, your dreams. We need to be thinking about what you want to get out of this experience. So I just want to zoom in first on path one. So senior year is and can be overwhelming. And really the goal of this webinar is to show you just how manageable the gap year planning process is. Actually, we have a full gap planning roadmap actually on our website that helps you navigate this process as well, if you want to look after this webinar too. And I remember the nerves and the excitement of senior year very well. And I know that there are a lot of emotions to balance. But it's also a chance for you to take the reins. And there are so many exciting things to look forward to. So I'm sharing this slide at this point. You probably know this timeline too well. Essentially, start the fall researching colleges and working with a college counselor to get your college apps in order. And then from there, you officially apply to schools and start to hear back around this time or earlier in the spring. And then by May 1st or 15th, you enroll in the college of your choice. So I'm mentioning that because you'll find that gap planning really fits in alongside that timeline as well. So there is a big misconception that you don't touch anything gap related until after May, until after the college planning. But just like any big decision, when you leave it to the last minute, it can become stressful and hard to pull off. So I'm saying that because you can really use your full year to better understand if a gap program is a good fit for you. So I think this info particularly is great for juniors to keep in mind who are here this evening, this summer and fall, as you are researching your college options. Start to take a look at gap-friendly colleges and start to understand their own gap year policies, their own deferral processes, because every school does it slightly different. And we'll talk more about the actual deferral process in a bit. But before that, just start to think about what you want your gap year to look like and research the gap programs that interest you. And then come December time, you'll be working with someone like myself, a gap year consultant, to really narrow down and finalize the programs that interest you the most. And as you continue through the timeline, you'll still apply to colleges as you normally would, start to hear back. And the May 1st is typically college decision day, and you'll want to defer your enrollment to start that next fall. And I can also respect that this is not an overnight decision. You deserve the time and the space to think through it and find the best next step. For those of you who are seniors on the call, you're still in the right place. You still have time to think through and have conversations about a gap as you're waiting to hear back from schools or deciding on which school you actually want to go to. The main date I just want us to all keep in mind is that May 1st or May 15th, college decision day, as you'll need to defer around that time. Okay, so as you start to research your gap options, it's important to remember that there is no typical gap student and no one reason to take a gap year. You can see some of the common reasons polled here, and as this chart shows, pretty much all of the influences surround personal growth and learning in various areas of their life. So whether you identify as one or many of these types of students, there's one thing that really encapsulates all gap year students. It's that you're curious and you think outside the box. So EF's main goal is to really prepare students for success in today's ever-changing and increasingly globalized world. And our educational philosophy actually celebrates travel as a pathway to understanding and self-discovery. And you probably don't have all the answers yet. Here are some of our students on their gap programs all over the world in really incredible places. And all of these conversations started from having a focused, intentional conversation and discussion around questions like, what is it that I'm curious about and want to learn more? And where could I learn that? Do I want to learn or practice a language? How much structure, support, independence do I want or do I need? And are there places in the world that you've always wanted to go? Any bucket list dream destinations? So I'm mentioning that because what it really comes down to is that goal setting and that early planning. Asking yourself those questions early is truly the best way you can make the most productive year. And all of you who are in the process of deciding to take a gap and making it happen, you have more power than you think. Our gap year consultants are the ones who are set up to help figure out what you want out of your gap and create a really unique plan that works for you. So again, the best way to get there is to talk to one of our gap year consultants. Here we are, and every student, like I said, has a unique plan, and there are lots of details that need to be ironed out on a case-by-case basis, and that's really where we step in, where we first connect with the students and families that we're working with, either over the phone or through Zoom, where we then have a conversation that outlines your goals, your interests, your motivations, then outlining the program that best aligns with those desires. And then we finalize the program details and make sure you have your specific needs covered. So when it comes to EF Gap Year, we have a bunch of different program options from gap semesters to credit-bearing semesters and our full gap year program. And we just don't have the time to walk through all the different options here this evening, but I want to show you the gap year as an example of what you could do during your gap. So I'll quickly walk through this itinerary. It is divided into 2 semesters, where semester 1 is focused on what we call guided exploration, where it begins 6 weeks in Europe, 6 different countries, where each week you're in a new city across Europe. Then it immediately transitions where we fly you out to Australia to spend 3 weeks in a culturally immersive experience there. And then we fly you immediately to Thailand to have another 3 weeks of authentic cultural immersion in Thailand. That's just your first semester. Then we fly you back home for winter break, which is about a month and a half, close to 2 months, where you can reconnect with mom and dad, friends and family, share photos, maybe work. Then semester 2 transitions, we fly you back out, and this gets a little bit more customizable, where you have the option to either do an immersive language learning semester or have an international internship with an English-speaking organization. And again, I know I ran through that. There are a lot of specific details within that, within the itinerary. Definitely look on our website or connect with our EF Gap Year consultant to get a more detailed look into what this feels like. Okay, so let's say at this point you have decided you're going to take a gap. What next? So now you need to defer your college acceptance. And what even is a deferral? So to defer your college acceptance means to postpone your enrollment, opting to start college a semester or year later. And students choose to defer for a variety of reasons, mostly to take a gap program. And more universities are adopting a formal policy around deferrals as more students are requesting them. It's actually pretty simple. So the deferral process, again, slightly varies through school. Some schools evaluate the requests on a rolling basis. Others have deadlines that range between May 1st to August 1st. So keep an eye out for what your specific situation looks like. Generally, the sooner, the better for both you and the school. And the main part of the deferral request can be the deferral letter, where it should explain what you plan to do with your gap year, why that time is important for you, and to achieve those goals that you set out, and how it will make you an even better student and community member at that school. And so again, this requires some reflection on your end about those goals that we talked about earlier, but we've also created a deferral letter template that we can share with you so that this process can feel even simpler and even more efficient. So just reach out to a gap year consultant for that deferral letter template. And most colleges really do support students taking gap years, and researching the gap policies of the schools that you're interested in, combined with the solid deferral letter, will result in very high chances of the deferral request actually being granted. But if, for whatever reason, the deferral request is not granted, however, again, it's unlikely, speak to your gap year consultant about our deferral guarantee, which allows you to book without worry. If the deferral request does get rejected, you have the option to cancel your gap year and receive a complete refund. So this means you can book and start planning your gap year ahead of time. And again, knowing that we will support your college's decision either way. But again, don't worry, we'll absolutely will work together to set you up for a good path there. And so while you're on your gap year, you'll gain even a better of an understanding of who you are, the sorts of things that you're interested in, and just what you want to get out of your college experience. And you also will come out with a more polished resume compared to students who wouldn't have done something like this, with enormous amounts of tangible skills and knowledge. And I actually want to highlight Diego because he's a great example of this. Diego explains, through this gap year experience, I realized that fashion is my career and what I want to do. Taking a gap year with EF helped me get into my dream college, Parsons School of Design, after getting rejected the first time around. And I'm sharing that because this story really demonstrates how an EF gap program can really help students just find those passions and turn them into college and life experiences that they're really genuinely excited for. And so Diego is an even better candidate for Parsons after he took his gap year. Okay, so ultimately, gap years in 2024 are really built as a gateway to success in college and beyond. And not only are gap year experiences beneficial for students, but they also benefit colleges. And we're going to dive into that a little bit with Michael as well. But students enter college more confident, more adaptable, and just better prepared for success than their peers who go directly into college from high school. And I think, again, this is a perfect transition into our conversation with Michael. And hopefully, you all are feeling a little bit more confident about making your gap happen. Again, we're here to support you through the entire process. Keeping an eye on time, I tend to talk a little bit more than I should have. But let's now turn to Michael so we can dive into some deeper themes between us here. Michael, I kind of just want to start this conversation off just by allowing you to speak on your experiences and what you have seen within the education space and how higher education, especially, has been evolving. Any trends that you've been seeing?
Yeah, thank you, John. So, you know, I am currently like the executive director of strategic partnerships at the Princeton Review. And what all that means is that I work with, school districts and nonprofit organizations all across especially the northern part of the United States. And at the Princeton Review, we definitely kind of keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening both at the, K-12, like high school level, and then also very much with higher education and graduate programs. We provide test preparation for all the major tests. We provide tutoring, and that's all the way up through students that are doing like postdoctoral studies. So like we need to kind of really know what's going on. And I think some of the big trends are one of a return to standardized testing, which I know students don't love, but the SAT kind of tells the schools what they want. Another big thing is, and I think this is in everybody's life, no matter what you're doing, is the really major onset and daily use of artificial intelligence. And what does AI mean? And I think especially for students that are heading into their collegiate experience, just 4 or 5 years ago, myself and many other educators would have very quickly said, "Hey, have you considered a job in coding?" And these days, maybe I wouldn't say the same thing, John. You know, it's gotten a lot different. I also would say that you know universities and even beyond your undergraduate, graduate experience, uh, companies, the workplace, everyone's kind of looking for something beyond the norm. So when I was a little kid, having a high school diploma was a big deal. Uh, you know, generation before mine and my family went to college. My generation went to grad school. Like, what's next, right? Uh, so a lot of micro credentials, a lot of languages, specializations, like certifications in particular skills, especially around like I'm going to recommend AI and really being able to harness it in a way that's productive. It can never replace the human experience, but there's really a lot happening around that. If you go to any education conference, it's like half the sessions that are available are AI focused. And I I guess it's a shameless plug for EF, but a gap year, uh, other languages, experience with other cultures, uh, being able to work with people from all across the spectrum of humanity and having real experience doing that is, I think, something very valuable. Like not only for colleges, but definitely beyond in the workplace. Uh, working, I live and work in New York City, and without those skills, you're in for a tough time.
Totally. Well, I appreciate all that, and there's so many pieces of that that I want to dig into as well. I think one note specifically just on AI and what that the integration of AI within curriculum or within just students' own academic journey. I think it also allows room for other skills for of students to also take light. Maybe I'm just curious to hear your perspective on that, specifically about the personal skills and independence and tools that you think students in this generation probably need in order to be successful today.
I mean, AI is really going to help folks with a lot of the heavy lifting and data entry that like folks of my age had to do coming up. Like when I was younger in my career, I spent a lot of time, John, a lot of time working in Excel spreadsheets and putting together Word documents and using Publisher and like just designing all that stuff. And now that part all kind of happens instantly. So the way we've been talking about it a lot, and you find this in a lot of the sessions I go to, it like professional learning and all that, is the human element, right? So you are kind of now like your own ambassador to the world of work. Like what you bring to the table as a person, like your preparedness, your ability to engage with other people, that soft touch on working with people from other cultures and other ways of life. Like all of those things are like eminently important now. Even they always were, but like now you're not sitting there all day just entering data and like doing things like what is funny to say the old fashioned way. uh it's just it's a very different world of work. And truth be told, like if I was a student and I was writing my college admissions essay, I wouldn't just have AI spit it out for me, because every admissions officer in the country has seen many AI generated letters at this point. So I'm sure it spits out something really nice for you, but like they all know. They all know like you're not going to fool anybody with AI generated text anymore, right? So your ability to personalize things, like anything from like that admissions letter to the work products that you make, to the meetings that you hold, to the way you engage with your professors when you get to college. Like the human element of things is going to be ever more important, just because so much of the other stuff is already done.
100%. And I also find that interesting because we're coming off of, you know, the past 4 years definitely haven't been easy for anyone, specifically high school students. And we know that their high school landscape has looked so tremendously different than every other high school student in previous generations. And I think that's also why we've been seeing a large rise in students wanting to also get out of their own kind of bubble and trying to explore pieces of the world and who they are, because they definitely didn't have that experience in the beginning, middle, or end of their high school experience as well. So I find that diversification of your own experiences and your own personal portfolio to what you're saying and leveraging that to schools, to employers, to whatever is next for you just seems like the almost next step on what is needed for students.
It's great. I mean, I personally, like one of the things that I did was like I took I took an internship at the United Nations and worked on like an environmental sustainability program. I knew that that wasn't going to be my career, but every time I put a resume in, which it's been a while, and I've only had two jobs in like the last like 15 years, but back when I used to have to apply to things like, on a regular basis, that was always a conversation starter. It would kind of get my resume taken out of the pile. And finding your things like that make you a great candidate for a college or grad school or your career, and just having something that differentiates you from your peers is a really, really big deal. And it doesn't matter if you're like really good at Excel anymore. It like kind of takes care of itself. Like you need to be your own ambassador, really.
which I think is super inspiring, but also can be stressful for some students because there's a whole new set of metrics and ways to be evaluated that wasn't taken into consideration before. And I think that just wants me on that note, I'm just curious to hear like your own personal experience, within your own like taking your own gap time. I know specifically in Senegal, you had some time doing some projects with some mangrove reforestation and some biodiversity efforts. Can you just talk to me a little bit more about like why you even were gravitated to that and how that happened?
Yeah, so I did like a post grad certification in international development management. And I was always interested in international education. So the main reason that I went to Senegal was to work with teachers that are called, in French, it's vacataires, which basically means vacant, right? Like they're completely untrained. So imagine instead of like applying to colleges right now, you were going to go teach in a classroom of like about 90 students. Your chalkboard was broken. You had to buy your own chalk. There's no air conditioning. There's no screens on the windows. And you're kind of like out in the bush in West Africa. So that's what like graduating seniors in Senegal sometimes face. And so my role was to travel around in one of the regions within Senegal and work with all their untrained teachers and basically teach them the basics of how to teach. So it started with the English teachers because of my own like level in French, but as things progressed and I got better, I was definitely working with teachers of other disciplines. I also, as part of that project, I ran an English language course for people who worked in like businesses, nonprofit organizations, like all different stuff. I didn't really have to do that one, but I was in Senegal. I mean, it was like a great thing, and like people really loved it, and I still am in touch and friends with quite a few of those folks. And then the third thing, which was kind of part of the project, was that there's mangrove forests in Senegal along this area called the Sine Saloum, which is like an area where a saltwater inlet and some freshwater meet, and so there's natural mangrove forests. But in Senegal, the main crop that they grow is peanuts, like groundnuts. And if you know anything about farming those, they put a lot of salt into the soil. So everything gets very salinated, and then that kind of destroys the mangrove. So I helped work with like a community organization there I basically was kind of like a glorified grant writer for them a lot. Was basically working with them to pull in a lot of funding. I only wish I had had AI at that time because it was a
Mhm.
lot of heavy lifting. I could have taken a lot of shortcuts. But that experience, like some of the teachers that I worked with, um, especially the English teachers, they used a lot of what I presented to like continue on in their career. And some of them got PhDs based off of topics that like we explored in my workshops, like 15 years ago. They're like now professors. So I always say that I learned a lot more than I could have ever taught during that experience, like a million times over. But truth be told, like I did manage to like make a difference in the lives of some people, and that intercultural sharing and everything, like I still get messages like all the Muslim holidays, like do I want to come and eat couscous with the family? Like it is a thing that it brings a new element of richness to your life. It just it, it gives you a little bit of perspective that expands outward the older you get, and you realize just how important that really was in who you are as a person. And obviously my wife's not here, but like she she would agree. Like international travel and like my experiences elsewhere are, part of the reason that she wanted to talk to me in the first place. So
I think that's so fascinating. Also, I mean, that's the same kind of sentiment we hear with so many of our students who do these programs. I think it's just great to hear that the benefits of taking a gap or taking some intentional time for yourself to follow a passion project pays dividends long after the program itself ends. And I think that's a note that I know for a lot of the seniors and juniors here, it's hard to look so far in the future and kind of zoom out on what this experience is because it's scary to get off the treadmill that is you go to high school, you go to college, you get a job, and you just keep going. To step out and take some time for yourself, that's what's looked upon as kind of untraditional, which is a strange way that is, how the world perceives it. But seeing just in conversations, but by doing those intentional projects, we just know it has such long lasting benefits, especially for the friendships that you make as well. I'm still connected with so many people that I've had just a couple conversations with when I was abroad, but that's almost like amplified, the power of what that felt like, only within a very brief amount of time and what it feels like uh, to this day. So on that note, I'm just curious if maybe you can speak on like the student side and like the students that you are encountering and the conversations and if there's anything directly that you think a gap experience could impact them, like how do you think a gap could impact the students that you interface with?
so I think the and I'm gonna speak a little bit from my experience again, but I also think this is applicable no matter when, is that like not only did I learn a lot about where I went, I learned, and this is a big lesson, that no matter where you go, no matter how different things are, like it didn't matter that I was like sleeping on the side of the road waiting for a donkey cart to pick me up and take me to go wait for a rusted old bus so that I could get on a canoe and cross a river and then walk like a couple of miles in the sun to go do a workshop. Like it didn't matter because at the end of the day, people everywhere are the same and you'll never know it until you go and try it, right? Like you just human beings are human beings and we all have a lot of the same basic needs in life. We have a lot of the same ideas. We have a lot of dreams for ourselves and for our children or our families. And I just think that you can't really replace that mindset that comes with experiencing something that's completely outside of your comfort zone. You know, it's really a big deal, and I think students nowadays, like recently, all the students we support in our classes and tutoring, we see their comments and they appreciate the help we provide, but they also have had the great fortune of having a lot more information available to them at a younger age, and they know that there's a wider world out there, and they know that there's a lot of possibility in this life. You only know what you find out, right? And now they seem to have a broader mindset, and they know that the world is a wide place. So I feel I feel really strongly that students are probably going to really continue to take gap years and continue to, even if it's not right after high school, like that international experience, that volunteer experience, that whatever form it might take, that language learning experience, whatever form it might take. I think there's a like slowly growing like shared consciousness basically around that idea that the world isn't just your hometown, and it's not just the college that's in-state tuition that's down the street. Like there's more to life than that, and so I think that that's something we see a lot.
I think it's so fascinating because I hear so many of those themes from the students that I engage with and the reasons that they want to do this. I also hear conversations um, from parents also wanting this for their children as well, just seeing like what it is, knowing what this program is and knowing the benefits and what can come out of it. And I think always like the biggest question I get is why wasn't this around when I was after high school or things like that, or I think it's also equally as astonishing that there are some parents that really have to motivate their children to want to take a gap year and travel around the world, especially for ones who want to send their children on a gap year. So there's still that conversation of this idea is still new, and is still there's still some hesitations with it. And I think that's totally normal. Obviously, doing something that this is a big life decision and something that typically students don't think about until they are exposed to high school. And I think, Michael, me and you have spoken a lot about just what the high school conversations have been like, and how guidance counselors also approach the topic of gap years, or maybe how they don't approach the topic either. I mean, both ways. I think that's involved. But again, for the students who have that kind of self-starter mentality, who are able to understand that, you know what, I kind of want to do something for myself and do something that is going to separate me and something that I care about. And I remember my own specific time when I was looking into different gap programs and having the conversation with my parents. My father wasn't really loving the idea, especially because this is something that was, again, relatively new and not a direct college experience. I actually opted to only do one gap semester in the fall because I initially thought that a full gap year was too much that I could handle. And then mid gap semester in the fall, I was I had such a great experience. I was so enjoying my time that I tried to actually defer again for the spring semester to take a full gap year. And this is a note to everyone in the audience. Most colleges don't allow that. So if you are deferring, definitely defer for the full year, and don't be like me who thought he couldn't handle it for the full year. Just an additional piece, an aside that I wanted to say. Also, I'm curious to hear specifically for you if you do have any tips or advice for students and also parents, families going through this process, and how even navigating their options and the sorts of things that they should be thinking of.
Um, so obviously, I kind of started, this conversation with one thing, but I know that a lot of schools are test optional right now. Or if you're in California, maybe they're test agnostic, like they won't do anything. But I would I would strongly recommend taking a standardized test and submitting a score. And here's why. So there's like two parts of this, right? So I have two applications. Okay, they're both from students that took rigorous classes, volunteered in the community, they did sports, they took AP classes, they did all the stuff. They did all the stuff. And one of them has an SAT score that is just, a little bit below the curve of what you would expect year to year for that student. And then the other one does not have an SAT score. And let's pretend for a minute that both kids took the test, right? But, one student scored pretty much, they both scored pretty much the same, but one student reported their score and the other student didn't. I can tell I can tell you with some confidence that college admissions officers are still looking at those scores, and that they definitely put a little extra weight on students who put in the effort to take the test. And if your score isn't as great as you think it could be, like if it's not like, the norm against the curve that the College Board or ETS has, but you did pretty well, report that score. Report the score. It is a difference maker. Like if I have to decide who's getting this scholarship, I work for the local I'm involved with the Parent Teachers Association in my town, and I have two applicants again, and one gave me a score and the other one didn't. It's pretty easy to let that score be the deciding factor, right? So I say nobody listen. Nobody likes to take the ACT or the SAT. No one ever does. If you do, I know what kind of person you are. But you can get through them, and you can do well enough. You can do well enough, and that score is going to make a big difference. Another thing that I'm recommending, and this is my newest recommendation, do some online coursework in AI. Just take any of the basic, quick Microsoft one or something on LinkedIn or something on, just do any free certifications you can and be transparent about how you use AI, and just be someone who's kind of like open and ready to move into the future, and don't try and, be sneaky with it and write your papers in the background and like nobody knows. It's not like that, and it's not going to be like that. I think you should just kind of embrace that if you don't think it's like, Terminator 2 or something. Uh, if if you're open to it and you just use it on a regular basis and kind of make it part of your college practice, your professional practice moving forward, I think it's a really great way to show people that you're future focused.
Mhm. And I think that, I mean, that the themes I'm hearing there as well are pieces that you're able to separate yourself from other students. And I think just the tangible piece of what a score or what a certification have or what an experience can have. I think those are the themes that I'm hearing are important for students and people, especially young adults in this in today's day and age. And I think there's a lot to go into it, right? These are a whole new set of factors that students are considering themselves against, and there are lots of things to keep in mind. So I always want to encourage students here who might feel overwhelmed by all this, or parents as well, just to have conversations with people like myself or other members of my team who have these sorts of conversations on a very frequent basis with hundreds of families every single week. And we really leave and breathe this stuff, and we know that students who do end up going through with our programs, again, return into college much more engaged with campus, much more engaged in their own academics. And again, for students here who maybe are feeling a little burnt out from school because you had a pretty difficult high school experience and are looking for something that is a little bit different versus rushing right into college. Again, I say entertain this conversation as well, because this can be something, and maybe that's why you're here today, this evening rather, to explore your options. And I think this is probably the biggest step, just getting yourself to an event like this, opening your eyes to what's out there. I think that's like a good, again, kind of baby steps into approaching a topic that is pretty unique, and 99.99% of students wouldn't have the opportunity to explore. And we also recognize that as well, that it takes a certain type of student, a certain type of privilege to even have the opportunity to do something like this as well. So just ending with those notes, because I think that's super important for people, students, parents, everyone who's here this evening to just hear. Also, I want to make sure that I'm getting to different questions that people have specifically for our programs, or for Michael as well. Again, you can throw it into the chat or the Q&A. I know one question was asked about details of the specific actual programs. I definitely would recommend, if you do want copies of what the itinerary or what your gap sample options could look like, there are the entire itineraries are published on our website. So you can see the full gap year itinerary that I walked through, as well as the individual semester options that we have as well. Also, I will plug tomorrow, we're actually doing a information session, which is a deep dive into all those programs in particular as well. So if anyone finds that helpful, definitely reach out to your gap year consultant to get signed up for that. And Michael, just want to thank you again for the conversation that we're having this evening with all the parents and friends that are here. And I actually just saw a question that came into the chat that maybe I'll point your way. That was asked if it matters if a gap year is spent in another country versus going to in the global north versus going to one in the global south, like Michael did, and some pros and cons of that. So I'll just speak on my experience, and then Michael, I'll let you kind of chime in here as well. There are a whole bunch of gap programs, gap time as we refer to, that students can engage in. This could be domestic in your own local community. Obviously, when you hear gap year, the first thing you hear is you're going to spend a year in mom and dad's basement playing video games. That's not what these gap years that I'm referring to are. These are intentional programs that are all based around, there are ones that are domestic or based around other areas of the United States, and also ones that are in the global south versus global north as well. So Michael, maybe you can dive into your personal experience and your thoughts on that question in particular.
I mean, for me, like the way I always think about things is, well, what do you want to do, right? So for me, working in like international education and like international development, for me, it was obvious that I wanted to, work in the global south, and, try and help and like some of the international development work that goes on, right? But if you want to learn to speak French, you could definitely benefit from Global North and going and doing a year in France. If you want to work on international business, Switzerland's probably not a bad idea. Like it just kind of depends on what your goal is in the end. So, could go either way.
For sure. Appreciate that. Yeah, that goal setting and what you want to get out of your time, I think is equally as important. And also want to recognize a couple questions that were asked in the Q&A here. This is the one that just came in, which is how much our gap programs cost, and you can use funds in a 529 to pay for a gap year. So one, yes, you can use, or rather we do accept funds from 529 accounts, but obviously I'm not a financial professional. Always the jurisdiction is based on your own, the account manager of that fund or a financial planner, tax professional. They obviously are going to have more insight because 529s are very much state by state, family by family kind of situation, and it goes along that. But again, to reiterate, we do accept the funds, but we defer to your financial professional to speak more on that. Another question that was asked here was about some of our program offerings and the customizability of what you can do in terms of stacking a couple different options. So I'll just quickly dive into this on a logistical front. So right now, we are no longer offering our four-week long programs, only because we are investing heavier into our semester and year-long program that we all personally believe is a better return on investment for our students and the student experience as well. So for the person who asked in the Q&A about kind of customizing their programs, definitely speak to a gap year consultant because they are going to have more knowledge on what is offered specifically for your timeline and what could be right fit for your daughter as well. Another question on the types of internships that we offer in Sweden. This is a very specific kind of situation, and we intentionally keep it kind of vague only because it's not like we have a list of 100 internships and we just tell you to choose one. It's actually a much more personal conversation we have with our students for our internships, where we have a conversation with them, unpacking, again, their goals, their motivations, their interests, what sorts of things they like to do, what sorts of things they've done in the past. And then with that conversation, we then would utilize all those pieces to then match you with an organization internationally in Sweden that most aligns with the goals you are looking to set out. I'll just touch on this. Another question I was asked, if more students do a year or a semester gap. I think if you were to compare the amount of students, there are more individual students who do our full gap year program, but because we have 5 different semester offerings, there are a larger chunk of people who do the semester offerings if you kind of group them into one. But the one gap year program compared to any one semester program, there are more gap year students. And again, for people who have a little bit more questions specifically on like the logistical side of things, I definitely will defer to tomorrow's information session because that's going to be a deep dive on all things EF, all things program specific. And you can ask the host or also your gap year consultant right after this conversation about anything else that is curious or I didn't have time to address. So that's just something I wanted to outline now. And kind of on that note, Michael, again, I think that pretty much wraps up everything that we wanted to discuss today, and just want to tremendously thank you on behalf of all of EF for your time here, spending it with us this evening. I know Wednesday night for anyone is definitely a busy time, and for everyone here to spend it talking gap years, talking college deferral, I think is super important. So again, echoing the sentiments in the chat, thank you very much for your time here this evening.
No, thank you very much, and it was a pleasure to be here tonight.
Thanks, Michael. And again, just leaving everyone off with, if there's anything else that you're curious about, you want to hear more from me, you want to hear more from our gap year consultants, they will be reaching out with you via email, via text tomorrow. So just stay on the lookout for that. And on that note, hope everyone has either eaten a nice dinner or is going to have a nice dinner or has a nice restful sleep this evening. So talk to you all very soon. And thank you again, Michael.
Thanks. Bye all.
All right. Take care.